I have a little quiz for you on this holiday weekend. One question. How many does Jesus send out ahead of him? 72? Got some agreement on that? That's part of the answer. Because in other translations of the scriptures, we're told 70. And that number is also accepted by the church. In both the New American Bible, which we just heard from, and in the Jerusalem Bible, Jesus sends out 72. In the RSV, the Revised Standard Version, and in the Ignatius Bible, we're told that 70 are sent out before Jesus. Now, crazy things like this are the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. Don't let that afflict you. They're symbolic numbers. Both of them go back to ancient manuscripts in the early church, both 70 and 72. And these symbolic numbers point to two different realities. Let's look at 70 first. Moses appointed 70 prophets, 70 elders to lead the people. Of course, Moses was the head. 71. The Sanhedrin was made up of 70 plus the high priest. 71. Jesus is sending out 70, and of course, he's the head. 71. So what we see taking place here is Jesus is establishing a new church, a new order. Just as we're told in the first reading today that Jerusalem is like a mother gives birth to children of Israel. So the new Jerusalem will give birth to disciples of Christ and nurture them. And so I like 71, 70 plus the 1. But today's gospel, Deacon Manny read, 72 are sent forth. I have to do a little bit more digging for this number. But we are told in the book of Genesis that Noah had 72 descendants. And traditionally, rabbis would teach that these 72 descendants of Noah became the foundation of the 72 tribes in the world, the 72 nations. That all people are descendants of Noah's children, family. And what the number 72 points to is the universality of the mission. Not only is the word to go out to all nations, but all nations, all peoples are called to the mission of Christ, which is very appropriate in this Pentecostal season, as we as disciples are called to the mission of Christ. And so Jesus is speaking to us today. When you go, travel light. Don't take a lot of possessions with you. You won't need them. The labor is worth his wage. You'll be taken care of. On the way, greet no one. Now, we have to understand that in Jesus' day, there was all kinds of etiquette associated with the greeting. It was quite elaborate. One could get really held up by a greeting. Not that I would ever get held up in a greeting, or you. But there's an urgency to the mission. Don't get distracted. I am sending you out into the world to proclaim the good news, to bring healing to the sick, to set those who are enslaved free. You are being sent. Don't get held up. Don't get distracted. Don't get lost. Keep in mind that you have a mission to accomplish. Offer my peace. And if they don't accept you, shake the dust from your feet. But tell them the kingdom of God is at hand for you. These words were our question of the week, source of our meditation this past week. And they're wonderful words, powerful words. What Jesus is saying is, when you go out into the world and you tell someone the kingdom of God is at hand for you, what you're basically acknowledging is that Christ has commissioned you, that you go forth with authority and power, that your presence becomes an encounter with the very kingdom of God. Think about that for a moment. And the universality of our priesthood. You are being sent out with power and authority. It could go to your head if you're not careful. And so Jesus says, I give you power. But don't rejoice so much in that. Rejoice that your name has been written by me in heaven. Rejoice in the gift, not in what you can do, but what I have done for you. St. Paul is concerned also in this missionary season of ours, this Pentecostal season, that we not get puffed up with pride. He's speaking to a community that is filled with pride. People are arguing with one another, divided with one another. Some are arguing, I've been circumcised, what about you? And others are arguing, I didn't need to be circumcised, what about you? Some are saying, I belong to this person and I belong to this teacher. I've read this book, I've read that book. I practice this kind of devotion, I practice this kind of devotion. And they are divided and puffed up with pride. And Paul tells them and tells us today, none of those things matter. The only thing that matters, are you being recreated? Are you a new creation? Have you been conformed to Christ? St. Paul can show the marks of his discipleship on his body. As he tells us in our reading today, he's been beaten, tortured, wounded for Christ. Blessed are you when they hate you and they insult you and they utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and be glad, Jesus tells us. For the kingdom of God is yours. It is beatitude. None of these other things bring true happiness. What brings us joy as disciples of Christ is to be conformed to him, drawn into his mission, to go forth into the world with power and authority. And so like the 72 or the 70, you're being sent. Sent with authority. May his will in the world be done through you. May his love, his mercy, the truth of the gospel be known to the world through you. For conformed to him, you are being sent